Hey, what's going on everybody? Today I thought I would do a little video on fly tying vices. I get asked all the time, what's the best fly tying vise? Or what's the best vise to start out on? And ultimately there is no right answer to these questions because so much of vise selection is subjective. What I find comfortable in a vise and the features that I like and work best for my tying aren't necessarily going to be the same for somebody else. So I always recommend that people, if they're shopping for a vise, to get to a fly shop or 2 or 3 and get your hands on as many vices as you can. Play around with them. Tie a few flies on them if you can. Find out if the vise is comfortable for you. Is it going to hold the hooks that you are going to be tying on most often? Is it going to work for the flies that you tie? Does it have the features that you like, or does it have a bunch of features that you're never going to use? These are all considerations that need to come into play when you're shopping for a new vise. So I thought I would do a little video here, just doing a little comparison of the vices that I currently own. Now these aren't the only vices I've ever tied on or owned. I've basically tied on and or owned vices of just about every sort in the production world. I've never tied on the handmade custom stuff like the Law and the J Vise and things like that. But when it comes to production vices, I've tied on just about all of them. And these are the vices that I've kind of settled on and I do the bulk of my tying on. Now, I don't tie on all these vices anymore. Some of them have been retired. Some of them are used just for real specific applications. But I thought I would just try to do a quick video and show you each vise, give you the ins and outs of it, the features, the retail cost, and what I like and dislike about each vise. And maybe that'll help somebody when they're trying to find a vise for them to start out on, or maybe they're just going to upgrade to something new. So I want to move a few things around here and jump right into the first vise. So the first vise that I want to look at is the Griffin Superior Model 2A C-clamp vise. This vise retails between $50 and $60 and is a bare bones minimalistic vise designed to do one thing and one thing only, and that's hold a hook. And it does that very well. You can get this vise in a C-clamp or a pedestal version. This one is the C-clamp, but I believe the pedestal is about the same price. This is a non-rotary vise, but it does have an adjustable head, so you can loosen up this brass knob right here and you can raise or lower this head to whatever angle that you see fit. To place a hook in this vise, it uses a 2-screw system. It has a large screw here that you can kind of see, and then a smaller screw just back from the tip of the jaws. To put a hook in this vise, you simply insert the hook and you use the small screw to adjust the jaws until they're just getting snug on the hook. Then you use the big screw to lock it into place. Once a hook is in this vise, it's not going anywhere. Some things that I like about this vise is the price. It's very inexpensive. It's not going to set you back a ton of money, and it's a great vise for somebody looking to get into the hobby and maybe see if they're going to enjoy it. There's nothing worse than spending a whole bunch of money and getting into something new and then thinking, I don't really like this. I also like the simplicity of it, and I like the adjustable head. What I don't like about this vise, it's a non-rotary vise, which I am a big fan of rotary, not necessarily for rotary tying per se, but just for all kinds of different advantages, like tying clousers. You can just turn the hook upside down and tie on the underside of the hook. And they're great for using epoxies and UV resins, where you can put stuff on there and then use the rotary to kind of help shape it. Overall, this is a very good vise. It's very well made. It's going to hold the hook. You're not going to fight with it. It's going to do what it's designed to do. So if you want a vise that's not going to set you back very much money, but it's going to hold a hook well and let you learn how to tie flies, the Griffin Superior 2A is definitely worth taking a look at. The next vise that I want to look at is a Regal. Now this is an early model Regal, but they still sell this particular vise and they label it as the Inex. It retails for around $150, I believe. The Inex is a fixed head non-rotary vise. You can get it in a C-clamp or a pedestal base. This particular one is a C-clamp. Regals are known for the simple way that they will hold a hook. There's no adjusting on the jaws whatsoever when going from different hook sizes. To put a hook in any Regal vise, all you do is squeeze the lever, which is going to open the jaws, place your hook in the jaw, and let go. It's that simple. Once a hook is in a Regal vise, it's not going to go anywhere. I could bend this hook out with zero issue. There's very few vices that hold a hook as well as a Regal. Some things that I like about this vise: I love how well built it is. This particular one is probably 30-something years old and it still looks and performs like new. And I really like the simplicity that is achieved with just squeezing the handle and putting the hook in. It's a very, very nice feature not having to adjust between different hook sizes. You can go from size 20 dry flies to size 2 streamers, no adjustments to be made. What I dislike about Regal vices, and I dislike this basically on all Regal vices, is the design of the head and the way they hold the hook. With the Medallion and the Revolution, which are Regal's rotary style vices, in order to use the rotary function, you have to have the head horizontal. And that puts the entire head directly behind the shaft of the hook. Some people really like that. I personally do not. I just find it uncomfortable. So I don't really tie on this vise a whole heck of a lot, but it is a fantastic vise. And if you're in the market for a simple, well-designed vise that is easy to use, not going to have a bunch of gimmicks and bells and whistles that you don't use, and will hold a hook extremely well, I highly recommend taking a look at a Regal. Next vise I'm going to show you is the HMH Spartan Vise. This is a rotary style vise with an adjustable head angle. It comes in a C-clamp or a pedestal. This particular one is a pedestal base. This vise retails for about $200. This is a draw collet style vise. And what that means is when you clamp down with the cam, it's going to pull the jaws back into the collet. And that forces the jaws to come together, which clamps down on the hook. To place a hook in this vise, you hold the cam lever at about this angle and you back this nut off until it's basically right up against the cam. And you insert your hook in the vise, get it where you want it, and clamp it down. This vise will hold a hook extremely well. Once you have it set properly, there's not a hook that's going to slip. This vise has rotary tension knob here that you can adjust to change the tension of your rotary, and it also has a little tiny Allen wrench set screw here that you can tighten down with the included Allen wrench. So once you get that set where you want it, it's not going to move. Some things that I like about this vise: I love how well it's built. This is a beautifully crafted piece of equipment. It's fully machined, there's no plastic, there's no rubber, there's very little on this vise that can fail. I also really like the fact that I can lock down the rotary tension knob so that when I get the tension where I want it, it doesn't back off as some vices like to do. It's also really nice to be able to change out the jaws in this vise very quickly. All you do is you unthread this jaw. There's just a threaded post that threads into the collet area here. You unthread that one and you put on whichever one you like. HMH jaws sell for $30 to $40, so you can get jaws to cover all of your tying needs, from big hooks down to tiny hooks to tube flies, for a relatively minimal investment. The other thing I like about this vise is it's not terribly big and bulky. This would be a very good vise for traveling on. It has a pretty small footprint, but it's built extremely solid. Some things that I don't like about this vise: just as with Regal vices, I don't like a vise where the head is directly behind the hook shank. That's just personal preference and what I like to tie on. I'm also not a big fan of the way this vise is adjusted to hold the hook. I find it to be a little bit cumbersome, but again, that's coming from somebody that is used to true rotary style cam vices. I've just tied on those for so many years that anything different is kind of hard for me to adjust to. Overall, if you're looking for a quality vise that's going to last a lifetime, very easy and simple to use, and not have a bunch of unnecessary features, I really recommend taking a look at the HMH vises. Up next is the extremely popular Renzetti Traveler. This vise retails for about $160 for the basic version, although they sell some other versions that cost upwards of $200. This is a true rotary cam style vise. It's available in a C-clamp or a pedestal. This particular one is a pedestal. This vise will hold hooks from 4/0 down to size 28, I believe, although I've never come close to tying anything that small. I tie pretty much only saltwater flies. So to put a hook in this vise, you insert the hook, and there's a small set screw on my near side. You adjust that screw until the vise is just starting to touch the hook, and then you clamp it down with the cam. This vise holds a hook extremely well. I've been very impressed with the range of hooks that I could hold in this vise and how well it holds them all. It's very simple to adjust, and once a hook is in there, you can bend out any hook without any issue. Now, as I said, this is a true rotary vise, so when set up properly, this hook and the shank is going to spin in exactly the same place. Now, in order to do that, you need your hook shank aligned with this part, this shaft right here. And to achieve that, depending on the size of hook you are using, there's a flathead screw right here. You can undo that and take that out, and you can slide this jaw up or down. There's 3 positions that you can put this jaw in. This is a size 1 hook, so if I wanted to make this absolutely true rotary, I would remove that screw, slide the jaw down to that particular hole, and then that would lower this hook down to be in line with this part of the shaft. Personally, I don't really do that because I find that just this slight bit of rotation on the hook is absolutely fine for my needs. This vise has a rotary tension knob, so you can thread that in, and basically you can go so far as to lock it down if you want so it's not going to rotate, or you can back it off to where it rotates very freely. Personally, I like a little bit of tension on my rotary. This vise also comes with the bobbin cradle, which is nice for true rotary tying techniques. In my opinion, this is probably the best vise available on the market for the money. At $160, it is really hard to beat this vise. It comes with a lifetime warranty, and it's extremely well made. There's very little on this vise that's going to fail. I have read and heard about this little rubber O-ring failing after tying thousands and thousands of flies. I've never personally experienced that, but apparently it costs about $1 to replace that. Now, some things that I like about this vise. I love that it's true rotary. I love the angle of the jaws, the shape of the jaws. I love how well it holds a hook. It's just a joy to tie on this vise. I also really like the price point. For $160, it's just flat out hard to beat. Some things that I dislike about this vise, first off, is the pedestal base. I wish that it was bigger and heavier, but I can't really knock the vise for that because this is sold as the Traveler vise. It is designed to be light and portable, so selling this vise with a great big huge pedestal base really doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm also not a huge fan of the rotary knob. I find that this knob backs off really easily, so when I get it into a position I like, generally by the time I get to the end of a fly or two, it's backed off and I start getting pretty loose in the rotary tension. Not any sort of big deal, but it is worth mentioning. Overall, I highly recommend this vise to beginners, to experts, to everybody. This vise, for the price that it costs, will last you a lifetime and will tie just about any hook that you will ever need. In my opinion, this one is really hard to beat for the money. Next up is one of my all-time favorite vises, and that's the Dyna King Barracuda. And this vise is available as a pedestal or a C-clamp and retails for about $450. This vise will hold hooks from size 8/0 down to, I think, size 26 is what they advertise. It's a true rotary style vise, so the hook shank is going to spin on its own axis. In order to achieve that, there's a nut right here that you can back off, and you can move these jaws forward or backwards to make sure that, depending on the size of the hook you're using, that it lines up with this shaft right here. This vise comes with a bobbin cradle for true rotary tying and a material clip. To put a hook in these jaws, it's a little bit different than most vises. You don't put the hook in and then adjust it to where the jaws are just touching. It takes a little bit of getting used to figure out where you need to have those jaws set. But once you do, it becomes second nature. There's 2 notches inside of the jaws, so depending on the size of the hook you are using, you might use those notches. For smaller trout size hooks, say size 8 and below, you would use the flat part at the very front portion of the jaws. For a little larger hooks, you would use the first set of notches, and for your largest hooks, you would use the second set of notches. So with this 1/0 hook, I'm going to use the second set of notches, and you just simply get it lined up into the notch where it fits. Sometimes that takes a little bit of tweaking, and you lock it down with the cam lever. And when it comes to hook holding power, there's very little that beats a Dyna King. Now, some things that I like about this vise: I love how heavy it is and how well that it's made. This vise is absolutely gorgeous, and it is going to last a lifetime. This is the Pedestal Vase, and it's the biggest, heaviest pedestal that I've ever personally tied on. I really like that because I tend to be a pretty heavy-handed tyer, especially when I'm tying larger flies. I like the Rotary Tension knob. It doesn't have a tendency to back off like a lot of them do. I think part of that is because I have it on this back side. You can also put it on the front side if you wish. But being on the back side, it's away from my hands. I don't bump it, so it tends to stay where I set it. Another feature I really like about this vise is that I can use this knob here to lock this in just about any position that I want. So if I want to tie a clouser, I tie on my eyes, my top part, I flip the hook over, lock it there, it's not going anywhere. I can now tie on the underside, and it's very simple. Once you tie on it for a little bit, it just becomes second nature. The main thing that I like about this vise the most, aside from the fact that it will hold huge hooks with a vengeance, is the access that I have to the hook. There's probably 5 inches between the main body of the vise and the tip of the jaws. That's a lot of room for somebody with big hands like myself and tying big flies. So if I'm tying in tails and things like that, behind the hook shank, it's totally open through here. I really appreciate that about this vise. Some things that I dislike about this vise, I honestly can't think of any. As I said, it does take a little thing getting used to for this style of adjustment for setting a hook in there, but I've tied on it for so long that I'm so used to it that that's not an issue for me. I guess the weight could be an issue. It's definitely not a travel style vise. This vise is a tank of a vise. It's one you're going to want to set on your tying table and leave it there. I guess the only other downside I could think of would be the price, but in my opinion it's not overpriced for such a well-built piece of equipment. So if you have the means, and especially if you tie big saltwater style flies or big muskie or pike flies or anything along that line, I highly recommend the Dyna King Barracuda. This is one of my absolute favorite vises. So the last vise that I'm going to show you, and the most recent addition to my collection, is the Stonfo Transformer vise. This is a pedestal-based, true rotary style vise with a unique interchangeable head system. This vise comes with 3 different heads. It comes with the standard kind of V-shaped rotary head like on the Renzetti or a bunch of others. It comes with a streamer head for tying large streamer style flies, and it also comes with a tube head for tying tube flies. It has a very unique system for changing these heads out. There's a coupling right up here on the top of the vise that you simply slide back and you remove the head, and then you can take the head that you want to use, slide that part back again, put it in and let go. It's really simple. If I want to switch over to the tube head, do the same thing. It just takes a couple seconds. Now I find myself tying on the standard head about 90% of the time because it's just does everything that I want it to do. It holds some pretty large hooks, and I don't particularly like the straight style as I've mentioned before in this video. I do tie all of my tubes on the tube head, so the other 10% of the time I would be tying tube flies. To place a hook in this vise, it's similar to the Renzetti and other vises. There's a small set screw on the near side. You simply put the hook in, adjust that set screw to where it's starting to get snug, and use the cam to lock it in place. The cam on this vise is extremely smooth. I've been very impressed with that. And as I said, this actually holds a wide range of hooks. This is a 1/0 size hook. This head holds it no problem. I don't know what the ultimate hook range is for this vise. I haven't actually found that written anywhere. But so far I've put upwards of 6/0 hooks in this vise using the streamer head. No problem whatsoever. Some things that I really like about this vise. I like the interchangeable head system a lot. It provides a lot of versatility. It's basically one vise that can cover all of your tying needs. I really like how well built it is and how smoothly it operates. It spins extremely well. The cam is smooth. Everything about this vise, it just feels really nice and very smooth. The material clip I actually kind of like. I usually am not big on material clips, but I have been using this one because I can kind of move it to wherever I want it. And I can grab the springs really easy and spread it out to put materials in there and just let go. Some material clips are kind of a hassle for me to try to get them in there. Another really cool feature on this vise, and it's really a small thing, is on the tire side there's a small thread hanging post. So this way, if I make a dubbing loop but I'm not going to actually use the loop yet, I can just make the loop and hang it off of there out of the way. This loop doesn't get all spun up and kind of a pain to deal with. Or if I need to get full access to the hook with both hands and I don't want that bobbin hanging down in my way, I can just hang it right on that little thread post. Real simple little addition, but it's a really kind of a nice feature. I also really like the overall design of the pedestal base. I'll try to show you this. There's some holes, hook holding holes along this side where I will keep scissors, a bodkin, whip finisher, that kind of thing right there in easy access. And then there's two fairly deep recessed pockets on the pedestal as well for keeping eyes and beads and dumbbell eyes and hooks and that sort of thing. A lot of vises have a little bit of a recess, but it's usually a really small recess, and I much prefer this deeper recess. Things that I don't like about this vise are minimal. One thing that kind of bugged me when I first started tying on it is that there's a little bit of play between the coupling and the head. Just the tiniest little bit. And when you're tying on it, you can kind of feel that little bit of movement. Like I said, at first it really bugged me. In fact, I even emailed Stonfo to ask if that was normal, and they replied that yep, that's totally normal. But after about a week, I don't even notice it anymore. I've been tying on this vise for a couple months now, and it's basically become my favorite everyday vise. The other little thing that I dislike about this vise is the pedestal base weight. It's just not heavy enough for my needs. It's a big footprint, so the vise never gets tippy, but it will slide around fairly easily on a wooden surface. That's a pretty small complaint, and it's one that I could easily fix by just using a different pedestal base, but I quickly became used to it, and I basically don't notice it anymore. I guess the other negative of this vise would be the price. At $460, it's definitely not cheap, but if you consider all that comes with it and the fact that it will cover basically all of your tying needs, from huge streamers and saltwater patterns down to little tiny midges and tube flies as well, the price tag isn't that bad when you consider that. So if you have the means and the money to do so, and we're looking for a vise that is extremely well made and going to cover virtually all of your tying needs, I highly recommend checking out the Stonfo Transformer. This has quickly become my go-to everyday vise, and I absolutely love tying on it. So there's a rundown of the vises that are currently in my collection. As I mentioned before, I have tied and owned many other vises in the past. These are just the ones that I currently own and tie on. I hope this video gives you some insight into some different vises and things that you might want to look for when you're purchasing a new vise. As I mentioned, I highly recommend that anybody that's shopping for a new vise get out there and get your hands on as many as possible. There's certain features that you might find you can't live without, and there's other things that you might find that you absolutely can't stand. And the only way to do that is to get your hands on some vises and give them a try. If you just buy a vise blind via the internet or something, you're taking the gamble that you're going to get that vise and you're not going to enjoy tying on it. And if you don't enjoy tying on a vise, you're not going to enjoy fly tying. So I hope this video helped, and thanks for watching.